about the only thing that's going well for China is exports. And one of its biggest export markets, of course, is the United States. So they really don't need this now.
At 5 a.m. this morning, US tariffs were placed on China, and within minutes, China hit back with tariffs on American goods. That is in contrast to events in North America, where US tariffs on Mexico and China have been delayed. The Times' Asia editor is Richard Lloyd Parry, and he joins us now. Good morning.
Hello there.
So there's no delay on these tariffs being introduced to China. Did China try anything at all to appease or head off Trump on these tariffs?
No, they didn't immediately announce these tariffs, unlike Canada, for example, which immediately announced retaliatory tariffs. The Chinese just, expressed strong disapproval, said it was very unhelpful, and then waited a couple of days before announcing the tariffs of its own. I mean, we are told the White House is saying that Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping of China are expected to talk in the next 24 hours. So we'll have to see what comes of that. But this response by China, is really pretty stiff and decisive. Tariffs on a lot of big American products, including rare metals, the kind of minerals that are used in technology, mobile phones. And they're also doing an investigation into Google, which is another element of it.
And what's the logic here? I mean, we've been speaking to a couple of experts this morning who've said you can almost see why Mexico and Canada may be targeted, because there are things that Donald Trump wants very specifically. His asks on China, though, are more complex and potentially harder to deliver. What do you think he's trying to get out of putting these tariffs on China?
Yeah, I think it's true that Canada, Mexico are in one category and China is in another. China and Mexico are basically countries friendly to the US. They're part of the US supply chain. It's clearly in none of those countries' interests for a trade war to develop in the long term. And, the tariffs have been suspended. Now they're going to talk. Looks like something will be worked out. China's something else, really. I mean, China isn't just China is a strategic rival to the United States in terms of trade, but in terms of everything else as well. That there's a great deal more to it. It goes very deep. The United States is the sole superpower and has been since the 1990s, but evidently its importance vis-a-vis China is declining. China is rising and growing militarily, economically very fast. And China's leaders and the Chinese Communist Party see it as their national destiny to overtake the United States as a superpower. So this is not just about trade. It's not just about these goods. It's not really, as Donald Trump says, about fentanyl, about this deadly drug, which he claims is being made out of Chinese ingredients going into Mexico. It's about something much bigger than that. Two super powerful countries flexing muscles and fighting in the long term for dominion of the world.
And in terms of the Chinese economy, I mean, how worried does China have to be about what President Trump has done? I mean, you mentioned that phone call. We'll stay across that throughout the day here on Times Radio to see if these tariffs are reversed. But how stable, how able to sustain the impact of these tariffs is China?
Yeah, it's serious for China. China's economy in the last couple of years has been struggling. They've got a lot of economic problems domestically, unemployment, trouble in the property market. About the only thing that's going well for China is exports. And one of its biggest export markets, of course, is the United States. So they really don't need this now. But, Xi Jinping, as always, he's not responsive. He's not an elected leader. He's not responsive to the electorate in the way that democratically elected leaders are. So he, has a different kind of way of looking at this. He doesn't want a big hit to his economy. That does matter to him. He doesn't want his people to be unhappy and to feel worse off. But at the same time, he is a leader whose authority and popularity to his own people very much depends on his status as a strong national leader of a proud and growing China. So he won't want to be seen to be giving in easily to Donald Trump.
Yeah, neither will Donald Trump, though, I imagine. Richard Lloyd Parry, the Times Asia editor, thank you for joining us this morning.
Dominic O'Connell, our business correspondent, is in studio with us. Dominic, it's interesting that there are different categories of country when we look at what's happened in the last week. There's sort of Colombia, which he can bully really easily. There's Canada and Mexico, which it seems that he can bully quite easily. And there's China, who is standing up to him. I wonder where you'd put the EU and the UK in those. What bucket would you put them in?
Well, the EU is definitely in the China camp.
Is it really?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's roughly the same size. The American economy as a whole is not that dissimilar to the EU economy as a whole. Two trading blocs that are kind of the same size. America's a bit bigger in its gross impact, but the EU also, there's a bigger sort of philosophical point here, is that the EU has its own view of how the world should work, certain types of regulation, how Silicon Valley big tech companies should be policed, all that kind of stuff, and really this is a contest between the two, because Trump will try and impose a US worldview, a US way of doing things on the EU via tariffs, and the EU's response will be, well, to stick up for itself, I suspect.
And do you think that's why Trump's delayed it? Because ultimately he hasn't got. We keep coming back to this ask question, don't we, Kate? You keep saying, he says he wants the fentanyl problem solved by Canada and Mexico. It's not much of a Canadian problem. He kind of doesn't really want anything from China other than to show that they're of equal might. What does he want from the EU?
Well, he morphs between the two, doesn't he? He says it's about non-trade goals, but at the same time, when he was talking about the EU, he stressed the big trade surplus, and there is a big trade surplus that the EU enjoys over the US, $350 billion. He put it out. I think the real number is more like just over $200 billion. But so he might well impose tariffs on them on the trade grounds. But as I say, there could be all kinds of other policy goals around regulation, around how Silicon Valley is treated, all kinds of things that could underlie that.
And the problem for the UK is the UK would be closer to Canada or Colombia than the EU when it comes to its.
It hasn't been tested yet. One thing the UK, I mean, it's a strange thing to say. One thing the UK has going in its favour is that there aren't that many exported goods that go from the UK to the US. I mean, there is a big trade, but it's not like the US where you have lots of oil going and lots of car parts going. The UK has deindustrialised, really. So it's very easy to put a tariff on a thing, very hard to put a tariff on a service.
Okay, that's really interesting. And we're talking about sort of practical consequences here, Dom, aren't we? So Diageo, massive company. Its results have just come out, is that right?
Yes, and they showed the real effect of tariffs. So Diageo is a big multinational drinks company, one of the stalwarts of the FTSE 100 here on the London market, makes Guinness, Johnny Walker, other whiskies as well, and quite a few of the big tequila brands, Don Julio, Astral, and some others. Now, whiskey, Diageo, got hit by tariffs in the first Trump presidency, and there were some fears that it might be on the list for EU exports or UK exports. And of course, tequila is the tequila brands are made in Mexico. So in its results this morning, Diageo said its trading is okay, actually getting a little bit better, but it scrapped its guidance to the market about full year profits, saying, well, we don't know what's going to happen. It says geopolitical uncertainty. Diageo has anticipated and planned for a number of potential scenarios regarding tariffs in recent months. The confirmation at the weekend of the implementation of tariffs could impact this building momentum, i.e. the recovery in trade that it had seen. So it could turn down because of tariffs. Tariffs are real, and this is another thing about the UK. We have big multinational companies listed in London that could get caught in the crossfire. So Diageo is getting hurt, not because it has operations in the UK, but because it has operations in Mexico. Trump's talking about tariffs in South Africa. Well, Anglo-American, one of the big mining companies listed in London, it's all about the South African economy. Its big operations are in South Africa. When China gets going with tariffs as well, that's another set of potential complications for multinationals in London.
Was the great Guinness shortage of the late 2024 big enough to make it into the results or not?
I haven't read that far. I don't think it did, actually, unfortunately. The made-up Guinness shortage.
Yeah, the made-up Guinness shortage that played us successfully. Not you, Dom, played me successfully.